Okay, let's just jump right in. Have you ever felt, well, stuck? Like you started out on a journey, you had a destination in mind, but somewhere along the way you just stopped. Today, we're diving into the really powerful ideas in Omalayo Okunola's book, Terah, A Life Interrupted by Trauma. It uses an ancient story to tackle this very modern, very human problem, how unhealed pain can literally stall our destiny.
Just look at this image for a second. It really captures that feeling, doesn't it? A connection, buzzing with potential, and then suddenly, it's severed. This is exactly what it can feel like when a life's journey gets interrupted, not by death, but by this emotional disconnection from our own purpose. It just leaves us feeling lost, not quite sure how to plug back in.
Now this is where things get really interesting. It's amazing how one single verse can spark a huge revelation. For the author Omalayo Okunola, this verse was apparently a stop-in-your-tracks moment. She asked a brilliant question. Out of a life that spanned 205 years, why does the Bible make a point to tell us where he died? Why is the specific detail of Haran so incredibly important?
And that one question, well, it leads us to the absolute core metaphor of her book. Let's really get into what the author calls the Haran trap and see how a place that should have just been a rest stop can become a permanent prison for the heart.
So to understand the trap, you have to understand the trauma. Terah's life, even though it's just a few verses, was just filled with pain. He waited until he was 70 to have kids, which was a big deal back then. The text never mentions his wife, which leads the author to wonder if maybe he was a single father. And then, the absolute unthinkable, he lost his son Haran. So he packs up, he sets out for a new beginning in Canaan, this land of promise, but his journey just grinds to a halt.
And this is the crucial point, the light bulb moment the author points out. This was probably no coincidence. Terah didn't just stop in some random town on the way. He settled in a place that had the exact same name as his dead son. He didn't just stop in a location, he literally made his home in his grief. And boom, that's it. That is the core concept. The Haran trap isn't a pin on a map, it's an emotional state. It's what happens when we stop at the site of our greatest pain, a past failure, a deep loss, a traumatic event, and we start to live there, totally unable to move forward into the future that's waiting for us.
This really brings the concept right to our doorstep, doesn't it? What's a Haran in your own life? Is there a memory, a disappointment, or a past season where you've kind of emotionally set up camp, maybe without even realizing you've done it?
So, now that we understand the trap, let's talk about why it's so critical to escape it. The consequences of getting stuck in Haran, as the author points out through Terah's story, are, well, they're profound, and they matter for every single one of us. Okunola pulls some really powerful lessons from Terah's journey to nowhere. She explains that when pain is screaming in your ear, it's pretty much impossible to hear the quiet voice of promise. That's how our wounds can muffle God's voice. She also points out how the familiarity of that pain, it can actually feel safer than the uncertainty of moving on. It turns a comfort zone into a cage. The key insight here is that unresolved pain, it doesn't just fade away, it can totally redefine our story and even multiply over time.
And this quote from the author just hits the nail on the head. At some point, a choice has to be made, right? We can't move toward a new destination if our hands are still gripping the past. Healing isn't about pretending the pain isn't real. It's about choosing not to let that pain have the final word.
So how do we stop settling there? Well, the author proposes this really powerful idea. She argues that therapy and faith, they're not opposing forces, they are partners in healing. Therapy gives us the tools to name and navigate the mechanics of our pain, to literally retrain our brain. And faith? Well, it provides that divine perspective and hope to renew our spirit. They're meant to work together to lead to true wholeness.
Okay, so let's get practical. Knowing you're in a Haran trap is the diagnosis. Now, let's look at the prescription. Omalayo Okunola offers a really clear 6-step framework for finding freedom and, starting that journey forward again.
It all starts with just radical honesty, accepting where you are without beating yourself up about it. Now, this second step is huge. You can acknowledge the place of pain without unpacking your bags and deciding to live there. It's about letting go of the pain's power to define you, choosing to believe that healing is actually possible, and then actively asking for it. And finally, like we just talked about, there is absolutely no shame in seeking professional help. It's not a sign of weak faith, it's a sign of profound wisdom.
Look, the process of leaving Haran is not easy. It takes courage, it takes work. But the author reminds us of a much deeper truth. The long-term cost of staying stuck in that place of pain is far, far harder.
So what happens when you finally decide to leave? What's on the other side of Haran? This is where the story takes this incredible turn toward hope, showing us that a new destination is always, always possible.
This contrast just shows the power of a new beginning. The cycle of being stuck doesn't have to be your legacy. Right after Terah's story of stalling out ends, his son Abraham's story of starting fresh begins. And what is the very first thing God tells him to do? Leave. Leave your country, your people, your father's house. Leave Haran. Leave that place of familiar pain for an unknown promise.
And this is the final empowering takeaway from the author. It acknowledges the truth of your experience. The pain is absolutely real, but it declares that something else is just as real, the promise of a future. And to step into that promise, you have to be willing to set down the weight of the past.
So we end with this question, right here. Terah's story is a warning, for sure, but it doesn't have to be your ending. His journey was interrupted, but yours is still being written. He stopped short of his destination, but you don't have to. The question isn't if you can move forward, but simply this: what is your first step?